for Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. We've got an all-star panel that we're very excited to share with you this afternoon. So just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, welcome and thanks for your time. We're recording. We welcome you to turn on your camera if you're comfortable, certainly. Add your questions to the chat at any time. Steph Tepsoba and I will keep an eye on that, and we'll either send them to the panelists throughout or we'll wait to the end. We'll just see how it goes. And then we have an exciting giveaway. Sarah Nannery's book. We have a couple copies of this. We're going to pick a few lucky winners and get this to you after the session. But we're thrilled to have you all here. So with that, let me stop sharing and introduce the panel to you. So we'll start with Dr. Amy Edwards. Amy, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Am I doing a full introduction of myself? Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
So hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Amy Edwards. I'm the director of the Drexel Autism Support Program. And I am happy to be here. I will let Tom take it from here.
Okay, 2 years I have been living on Zoom and I still cannot remember to unmute myself before I talk. So I'm Tom Edwards. I'm a Drexel alum, but I'm actually at Temple University now. I'm the chair of an engineering technology and management department at the College of Engineering. Came to higher ed after a long industry experience in engineering and management, and try to connect what I know from personal experience with family members on the spectrum with what I know about leadership and management to try to figure out what we need to do differently so that we can no longer ignore the resource and that's being ignored. Thank you. Kudzai, I'll pass it to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kudzai. I'm a first-year student in the Human-Computer Interaction Master's Program. And I was late diagnosed 2 years ago after my world came crashing and burning, moving into my first big girl job, and then realizing all the systems that I had in place whilst I was in college and in high school don't exist anymore. And yeah, I'm ready to share my story and my experience. And I'll take it to Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Nannery. I'm the Director of Development for Autism Initiatives at Drexel University. I'm also autistic myself. I'm a self-advocate and my son is autistic. And like Marie mentioned, my husband and I just co-wrote a book about sort of my experience in early career and navigating relationships. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you all. So Kudzai, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, awesome. So the first question is for everybody, just to kind of talk about, if you are autistic, when you were diagnosed, and how did that affect your experience with navigating work and school, especially, higher ed degree. And if not, talking about your personal experiences with either family members or people that you're working with. So whoever wants to start first.
I'll start since I can answer the first part, which is the diagnosis. So I was also late diagnosed. I was not diagnosed until I was 31, so just a couple of years ago. So I navigated work and college without the diagnosis. It was challenging in a lot of ways. I also, I feel like not much might have changed if I did have the diagnosis, aside from the fact that I might have sort of felt a little bit better about myself and what my challenges were. I would have understood why some things were harder for me than others, and I might have gotten a little bit more help in certain areas. But I sort of found my own way. I found a niche group to fit into. I credit marching band with being one of the main reasons that I got through college, because it gave me structure. It gave me a social outlet. All the other band geeks were my friends. So, and then when I got the diagnosis, it was a little bit scary because, you know, there's still a lot of stigma that can come with it. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to open up that door, but it was the best decision I've ever made in my life because it really opened up so much about myself and my childhood and sort of who I am and why I am the way that I am and why I think the way that I do, and gave me so many more tools that I can use to be successful.
Thank you.
I'm not on the spectrum, so
Feel free to go,
can't-
Tom.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
feel
not.
free to take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not on the spectrum myself, so I can't speak from personal experience. My family member, son on the spectrum, and that's why, you know, one day he was complaining about his supervisor at work about he did this, he did that, and that's when it dawned on me that his boss had no idea what he was doing, and that's when I started down this path. And I've talked to so many people over probably 10 years. And I remember two conversations, one very, very early in this journey discovery, I guess, this fellow was 41 years old, master's degree in computer science. He was married, he had 2 kids, never understood why he could not keep a job for more than a year at a time in computer science. You know, he was always getting fired until like age 41, he was diagnosed as being on the spectrum. So for him, it was a sense of relief. Like, now I understand the challenges I've had. Another conversation was just recently with someone who is actually another computer science person. And he's actually a manager, you know, which I just, so talking to him was awesome because that's one of those unanswered questions. But he was diagnosed late in life as well. And his take on it was, I'm kind of glad I wasn't diagnosed earlier, because I knew I was different. I didn't need the whole world telling me I was different. I knew I was different, and people, I didn't fit in, and I didn't care. I just pushed back on people when I didn't fit in. So I guess, you know, that like so many things, it's a complicated issue, and I don't know how to discern a pattern from the different people I've spoken with, except that it's complex and it's almost got to be taken one instance at a time.
I have a question. Hi, my name is Elsa Cayeli. I am a mother of a child, well, a young man, not a child anymore, in the spectrum. He was my first child, so I didn't know any different. Then when we have our second child, then it was the aha moment of all the, as a parent, of the milestones. Hearing you speak the adults, I was thinking, would it have been a different journey if we wouldn't have the interventions that we had in place for our son? And then it makes me think, is it different for females in the spectrum than for male in the spectrum? Is it more, I know that it's a spectrum, of course, it's different degrees, but hearing you speak, the strength that you have, and the grace with which you have conducted both your careers, if we would have been different for you if you had any interventions in the past, or would have been easier developing those skills, or as having to fight yourself through finding your own coping mechanisms and developing your own compensation techniques in your own. English is my second language, so I apologize for the mistakes. If you have, like, if it was the courage that you found in yourself, having to go through all those things when you're younger, it's you develop your own tool set. And I don't know, now I'm thinking, it's like it's better to go through it and, you know, not second guessing, but wondering how the journey would have been.
Elsa, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to make sure that we can respond to your question or comment, and then we'll hold any questions like that till the end. But thank you for that. Amy, did you have any feedback on Elsa's comment?
Well, honestly, I didn't know if Sarah wanted to answer. Since you were
Certainly.
talking about-
Yeah, of course.
I think first, I think Kudzai's tried to unmute a couple times. So please, Kudzai, go first.
Of course.
Yeah, I can definitely answer that just because I'm still in college and like finding out with my mother, who is now also older, but I have a very young sibling who's also on the spectrum. So it's kind of like we're kind of a mirror of each other, where my mom found out that my youngest sibling and myself were both autistic at the same time when we have a big age gap between us. Kind of like gave us time to reflect as a family on like my upbringing and then my little sister's upbringing. For me, we had no idea, you know, but my mom kind of had an idea that I had these quirks, you know. I needed time away from people. I needed time to process conversations a little more. So we kind of like figured that out and naturally, but it's not like we had an idea what was going on, right? But if I had not had that experience and like my mom wasn't really like, you know, like knowing would have been comforting, but I feel like it wouldn't have changed my experience because overall, like I was able to kind of come up with those mechanisms. I played competitive sports. I was a competitive field hockey player. I played national. Like that was my outlet. Kind of similar to you, Sarah, where you know, you were in band. I was an athlete all throughout high school and then college, and I played for my home country. So I feel like I had that opportunity to kind of like come up with that set of coping mechanism, like be able to kind of overcome everything with the support of my family, kind of having an idea that, you know what, Kudzai has her own way of doing things and we're just going to roll with it. So that was just the grace that I was afforded. And I would say knowing back then would have just made the process maybe just easier, you know, mentally knowing, but overall, I don't think it would have really changed much, to be honest. So that's my opinion, but maybe other people have a different reflection.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say from my experience, similar, Kudzai, like knowledge, I feel like knowledge is good. You know, it's good to know. It's always good to know more, I think, me personally, but if we had known, I don't know that much would have changed, honestly, because, you know, my family also recognized certain quirks. Like my mom insisted that I do theater, you know, because I was quiet and didn't learn how to project my voice, and I wouldn't speak up when I needed to speak up. And so we did our own interventions without knowing that they were interventions. It was just like, okay, this is an area of challenge that we need to work on. And so she would support me, like going to audition for the theater and like getting on stage and learning how to project my voice in certain and making cold calls, like call the pharmacy and see if the prescription is ready. And I'm like, what, you know, but like walking me through, here's what you say, here's the next step. So these are things that we were just doing naturally that would have been part of an intervention if we knew. And maybe there would have been other tools that I could have used. But I think for me personally, it wouldn't have changed much. Now, there's going to be a lot of, you know, like you said, Elsa, it's a spectrum. So there's people that are going to need other supports in other areas. And so it's absolutely necessary. But I think you sort of, whether you have the label or not, you figure it out. You find the interventions that you need.
Thank you. Kudzai, back to you.
Okay, awesome. So actually I feel like Sarah, you kind of like gave us a little insight into the next topic, which is about communication. And I wanted to open up, you know, to all three of you and like talking about communication in the academic and also professional setting for people. Like if you have any strategies or tips that you have picked up you know, along your journey over the years, and like what worked, what didn't, and what advice you have for people in nurturing, you know, one, relationships, and two, being able to communicate effectively your needs, and like also, you know, just how you work. How did you all navigate that?
So I'll jump in here. So I have a son who's on the spectrum, which is how I got into this. And it, you know, I think it depends on the person, really. Each person, you know, right now we're doing a social workshop and we're going over, you know, how to have conversations. And a lot of the students that I have say they know how to say hello, they know how to say how are you. They don't know where to take it from there. And it can be a detriment, not only in social situations, but in professional environments as well. So, so we're working on some of those skills right now. But I'll let Sarah and Tom talk more about that.
So I wrote a book about communicating, because Larry, my husband, Larry, has really helped me figure out how to communicate with people, because similar to a lot of your students, Amy, I'd be like, hi, how you doing? Like, what else are we going to talk about? So I've learned sort of how to read people and sort of get by the small talk phase. I think that's one of the keys for me, is that I am very uncomfortable in the very beginning where a lot of people are just sort of easy. They want to keep the conversation surface level. They want to talk about the weather or sports or things, because that's a lot of people's safe space. It's not safe for me. That I don't thrive in that space. And so I've learned to have some like topics in my back pocket. And it's really funny because my son is starting to do this on his own. He was asking me, it was like Sunday night, and he's 6, and he's like, Mom, what did we do this weekend? And I was like, oh, well, we went to the park and we flew your kite. And why are you asking? He's like, because I know when I get to school on Monday, people are going to ask me what I did this weekend, and I'm not going to remember, and I need to know what to tell them. So I do the same thing. I sort of have like a catalog of a few things that I can small talk with, but then I need to take care of myself, and I need to build the relationship the way that I need. So I will move it out of small talk as soon as I can, and I'll find something that the other person is passionate about or that they like to talk about. Often if it's an adult, it's their kids. So I'll connect about the whole parenting thing. So I'll find an in to get past the sort of surface level talk. And even if that in then leads to a different in, somewhere where I can really connect with a person on a human level. Because for me, the connection doesn't happen until I get to that deeper level of conversation with somebody. For someone else, the connection can happen pretty quickly. Like humans are made to connect, but I need that little extra to be able to really connect with somebody. And so figuring out what makes the other person tick and what they like to talk about. And so then that lets me get in a little bit further past the awkward small talk phase.
I can comment on this from the perspective of, because I think the question, Kudzai was, you know, correct me if I've got this wrong, but from a professional perspective, communicating in the workplace. So when you're the boss, manager, the leader, whatever you want to call it, you got to expect everybody on your team to be different. They're going to have different strengths, different unstrengths. They're going to communicate differently. And as the boss, you're dependent on every one of those people in your team to be successful. Because if they fail, you fail. So, you know, if you got to communicate with one person one way and somebody else a different way, that's what you got to do. And you got to figure out, you know, what people's comfort levels are and work with them. Find, you know, I guess it's meet them where they are, I guess is the context, and just expect everybody to be different and modify your approach to everyone on your team. You know, and I can think of my own son who expresses himself reasonably well verbally. There's a little bit of a lag while he thinks before he speaks, which a lot of people should probably emulate that. But it's very different when you read written communication from him, even a text message, the grammar, the sentence structure, everything is like perfect, and it's kind of hard to reconcile that someone who's a little bit studied in their verbal communication is so fluent in the written communication. And, and again, back to the workplace environment, as a supervisor, manager, accept that, play to everyone's strengths. Don't expect everybody to fit what you think they should do. I'm on a soapbox about that, so this may not be the last time I say that today, but I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, and Tom, can I just jump in?
I really,
yeah.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I just jump into to expand on that, Tom, because like also from the autistic student or employee's perspective, tailoring my communication as well, because so many times, like in the workplace or in an academic setting, I want to send an email. That's all I want to do is just communicate by email because that's my strength. And I feel like more gets done that way. But a lot of people they don't read the email. They don't like email. They infer context that isn't supposed to be there. And sometimes it's much easier for the other person if I pick up the phone. So, somebody says my video is frozen. Oh, well, you can still hear me. You just can't read my nonverbal cues. Hi, welcome to my world. So sometimes, what I'll do is I'll figure out, okay, this person is not going to read my email, no matter, even if I put in 2 sentences, they're not going to read it. So I have to get up and I have to go and find them, or I have to pick up the phone and talk to them. And so if I need to, I'll have my script that I wrote already on the computer as I pick up the phone and talk to them. Or I'll have notes that I wrote out and I'll kind of memorize them as I'm going to the conversation. It's harder for me, but it gets things done faster in the long run because then I'm not sending a whole bunch of emails wondering why they're not reading them.
I just want to respond to that.
I totally agree with that. Oh, no.
No, go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead, please,
Go ahead,
please.
go
No, please, go ahead.
I'm putting together both of your stories because I feel like that's my experience having been in industry and like working and now back in academia. I feel like I'm having a better experience in the academic setting compared to working in industry. I feel like also it was probably because of the nature of my job, but truly like I feel like there's definitely like learning from academia. I feel like people are very more understanding if I mention it, where if I had mentioned it in the workplace, I would be met with reactions of like, it kind of feels like a shortfalling almost, like, hey, I take time to just like process the meeting. I can't give you feedback on, the presentation immediately or on the product immediately. I would need some time to communicate that. So I feel like that's something that I personally struggled with, and I really like want other students to kind of like be aware that like going into the workplace, sometimes it could be really different, especially if you've only been in academia, of which that was my case. And then I felt like I was open to communicating my needs, but then I was met with this like, oh, you need an hour? What? But it's after hours. And I'm like, yeah, it's after hours. I'm pretty sure I can do that after and we can meet tomorrow. But like, that was something. So I feel like, Tom, maybe this is a question for you, like navigating that, where you come in with like, very open to communicating with that team and like hoping you get received the way you described that ideal team, which I would love to work on. So
that's a tough question. It's a great insight and a tough question. If you're, and look, to me, it comes down to the boss, right? The boss, sets the tone. If I want my team to be accepting of different people's styles, strengths, whatever, I have to be that way. If I'm not that way, if I don't set that example, I can tell people to do it till the something freezes over, and it's not going to happen because I haven't demonstrated, I haven't modeled that, and it's so I don't know how to get my boss to change. I don't know how anyone gets their boss to change. So my mission in life is trying to get people to think about this before they become the boss, and then they can do it differently than their boss did it. But from your example, if someone reports to you and they say, you know what, I need an hour before I can give you feedback. If you get really valuable feedback after that hour, why do you care that it took an hour? You got really valuable feedback that's going to make you more successful. And I tell my students this, I tell my graduate students this, if somebody needs that hour, and I don't use that specific example, but why do you care why they need it? They tell you, I'm going to be more effective if you let me do it this way. Well, what I need you to do is be more effective. So by all means, do it that way. And, and then you got to follow them up and make sure that they're actually, being more effective. I mean, that's the not fun part of being the boss, but you got to accept people and let them make their contributions the way that they can. Because, and I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox here. If I told you, you know what, that's not acceptable, you need to give me feedback right away. Well, I'm not going to get it. You that's not you. That's not what you do. And so I'm not going to get good feedback. You're going to do what you have to do because I'm the boss and I told you, you got to do it this way. But I'm not getting the quality. And why would anybody want that? Why would anyone in a leadership position want that? Look, I know this happens every day. I know this happens all the time, but it shouldn't. I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but thank you. Great question.
Thank you for that, Tom. The next question is going to be more about seeking help, and I feel like I'm going to throw this into Amy's court. Students at Drexel realize that they need that help and that support. Who do they contact? And could you talk more a little bit about what your office does and the services that you offer?
Sure. So, DASP is, we're open to any neurodiverse student. They don't just have to have autism. So neurodiversity can be social anxiety disorder. It can be dyscalculia, dyslexia, anxiety. It covers a broad array. Basically, if a student comes to our office and says they need help, we're going to help them. That's kind of how it works. But we do a lot of academic coaching. We do a lot of social coaching. There's a lot of one-on-one, and each student is so different that it's a little individualized, or a lot individualized, depending on the student. So it's kind of it in a nutshell. But if you want more information, there's more information on the website.
And to throw to Tom and Sarah, how do you suggest people go about asking for that help? And how did you ask for help, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll focus a little bit on sort of the academic piece because I know Tom will talk about employment. So this was before I knew that I was on the spectrum. So I wasn't going up to my professor and saying, look, I'm autistic, I need you to do X, Y, and Z for me. But I would find myself getting very lost in long lectures because that's not my learning style. I need to be able to have a visual sort of, I'm a visual learner, not an auditory learner. And it would be an hour of content of somebody talking, and I can only take so many notes. So I had to either talk to the professor afterwards, maybe send an email, and ask if I could get lecture notes. I asked my roommate if she knew of if there was a way that I could get other students' notes, because I needed to be able to go back and read through. I also looked into ways to learn how to do shorthand so that I could take notes, but because I wanted to write every single word down that the person was saying, and that's impossible. You can't do that when listening to somebody. So I looked into how could I take notes faster. And I asked for presentation slides afterwards. Can I get the PowerPoint so I can look through it on my own time? Because I just needed a little bit of extra absorption time for things. There were often times when I would ask for, because I have a lot of us, autistic or not, have exam anxiety. So leading up to a test, I would ask for sample tests, because then I can, even if it's not the same content, the content I can study, but is it going to be multiple choice? Is there going to be, you know, like a long answer type? Just knowing the structure of the test helps me in advance. Knowing how long I'm going to have, knowing if it's a timed test, knowing, you know, all the different structure pieces. If I know that ahead of time, then I don't have to stress about anything except for the content, which is what I'm supposed to be focusing on. So I would ask for those things after nearly, I don't know, mom is probably listening. I almost failed my first semester, not my first, but the second semester of college, because I just was having so much trouble keeping up with study habits and people not teaching to different learning styles. So I learned how to ask for some of those things. And I know Amy does a lot of work helping her students ask for those things. And, you know, professors are, for the most part, pretty understanding, some aren't. And so then, you know, I find the content in other ways. I started to find my own books about certain things if I wasn't getting it from the class. And I think you know, this question of like having to have a diagnosis or do you disclose, I always go back to what are the specific supports that I need. I don't necessarily need to tell someone that I'm autistic. I can if I want to, but I need X, Y, and Z to help me be successful. And I ask for that specifically, and that helps.
I'm going to jump in here real quick on that note. So my son, when he got his most recent job, which he's been at for 3 years, knock on wood, I asked him, I said, did you disclose? Did you tell them you're on the spectrum? And he said, no. He said, what I told them is I may need things broken into steps and I may need things communicated more than once. Like he told them exactly what, I was like, huh, okay. So, you know, and that's worked well for him. They eventually, you know, now they know he's on the spectrum, but you know, that worked.
That's amazing that worked out for you. I initially had disclosed that I had ADHD because I knew I had ADHD before I knew I was autistic. So that was an interesting kind of like mix of like, you know, working with my employer and like them knowing that, and then kind of like finding out that I was also autistic. I didn't disclose that actually. So it worked well. I just kind of added this extra of like, oh, this is actually what I need now to work better, da 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 da. And then also on what you mentioned, Sarah, about failing college, I almost failed out of my first semester of undergrad. And that is because I had chosen a major that wasn't conducive to my learning style. I am a kinesthetic learner. I need something tactile, hands-on. And so that's when I flipped from being an English major to being a geology major. I was outside, I could touch the rocks, I could see them. And it felt like, you know, when we're doing experiments in the lab, it's happening right in front of me. And I know exactly what I need to do to get the outcome for like lab reports and like exams. It's like very, I would say, you know, like very logical, just like A plus B is equals to C. So I feel like changing my major really helped me also kind of learn better. And I found a new interest too. I was like, what's the most tactile, like hands-on course? And it was either chemistry, physics, or geology. And I picked geology because I felt like it was a mix of both. So that's my experience with like, it wasn't really asking for help. It's like, I realized that I wasn't learning well, even though I loved English literature. So.
I'd like to comment
Go
from
ahead and
two perspectives.
please go ahead. Thank you.
One is an educator, as a teacher. You know, we get the letters, right? If someone, you know, goes to the disability services and they needed an accommodation, we get the letter. And, you know, that so-and-so might need, you know, more time to get assignments done. But they're supposed to ask you. I don't wait. If I get a letter that said, I got a sticky right here on my computer with a student that I got an accommodation letter for on, for this semester. And if I think that student's struggling with a deadline, I don't wait for them to ask. I say, hey, you need a couple more days on this? You look like you're spinning your wheels. Go ahead, take the couple more days, just do it. So that's one perspective. The industry perspective, the job perspective is really hard. So there was research done. It's in the management literature. Meredith, and I can't remember her last name, from Microsoft, researched, how many, the neurodivergent people work for Microsoft, and her conclusion was a not insignificant minority of software people, engineers, have neurotypical profiles, I think was the actual word. And one of the things she found is that people were not confident in disclosing because of fear of negative career consequences. And you know what, I'll be the last person to stand here and say, you know what, that's an unfounded fear, because I've got no data that shows that's an unfounded fear. And no, I don't even have anecdotes that show that's an unfounded fear, unless you're at some place like SAP, or Microsoft. But for the rest of the world, we got to change the perception. And there's an education part of this, and that we have to get people to understand, the whole world needs to understand the value that neurodivergent, neurodiverse folks bring. I mean, that's there's a pretty significant neurodiversity employment, autism at work movement, whatever you want to call it, in the Philadelphia region. And most of the people that are involved with this, the argument is always that this is a value proposition. Bringing this diversity into your team, into your place. This is not about, being nice. This is a value proposition. And so when someone discloses to you, that's an opportunity to say, this is someone that thinks differently from everybody else on my team. What's the opportunity there? What's this strength, this unique strength that I can, find a way to have them benefit the organization. But we're not there yet. And there's a lot of advocacy, education, being a self-appointed pain in the neck on the issue to get to that point. But we're not there yet. I don't think we're there yet.
Thank you for that reflection, because I also feel the same fresh out of industry, but I'm positive that we will eventually get there. I'm going to segue our discussion to self-care. Even though it is a buzzword, whenever I hear it, I think of bath bombs and like face masks, and I don't want to think of it like that, because I feel like it goes deeper than that. And there's things that we should be doing for ourselves, taking care of ourselves, having to deal with the world, and then coming back in, like, what is it that you do for yourself, and in terms of like practicing that self-care? What does it look like, and how do you express it for yourself if you've, your family members, and like, how do they do that? I'm really curious to know, because for the longest time, everyone's like, you should just try bullet journaling. That's another, like, there's like only so much you can do, but like, how do you truly get to that place where you're actually practicing something that works? So I'm curious if you found that. I would love to know too.
Yeah, I'll go first, because I feel like self-care is something that I really need to work on. I'm a mom with, my kids are 2 and 6, so self-care is like a big thing that I need to get more of. And I'm also working professional, and I'm a wife, and I have relationships that I need to maintain, and all of that takes energy and time. And I think for me, like you said, Kudzai, there's all this stuff out here, like, bubble baths and spa days, and you sort of are bombarded with this media around self-care. But for me, it's just time, because so much of my time I spend giving to my job, giving to my kids, giving to my husband, like giving myself to everybody else. And I need me time. I need time to dedicate to just being with myself. And it doesn't need to be in a bubble bath. I could be sitting in an empty room with nothing happening and just be with me. And I feel like that's totally valid self-care for me, because I need time to live inside of my own head and my own thoughts, and I need time to process. And I don't get that all through the whole day because I'm, putting my time in all these other places and putting out so much and talking, and I need time to put into myself, if that makes any sense. Like, I'm not like talking to myself necessarily, but I'm sitting there and just being in my thoughts, because I need that process time from just being alive during the day.
I can relate because as a Quaker, for like meeting and just sitting in that hour of silence, I found that was my place of comfort too. And so just being present and sitting is also kind of something that I do, but in a completely different way, in Quaker meeting, but I can totally relate.
There is a question in the chat that would be good to be addressed, I think. So the question is, if a college doesn't have an autism support program, what should the students seek out to be successful besides disability services and accommodations?
So, well, obviously, like you said, disability resources, see what tutoring options there are on campus, see if there are any peer mentoring programs out there that, I know within Drexel, we have a ton of peer mentoring programs that aren't, through DASP. I know engineering has one. I don't know if CCI has one, possibly, yes. So, look for some of the resources and some of the things that are going on campus that might be able to help a little bit more.
And usually there's a club on campus. At my undergrad, we had one specifically for people on the spectrum or just anyone who was neurodivergent. So that was also another place that I should have known back then, but I was just part of that community because most of them were my friends and they were also athletes and dancers and theater kids. So we just all hung out together and it was such a great place to just find community. So I suggest looking into clubs too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Kudzai. I think it depends too on where someone needs supports. Like for me, I didn't really need a lot of academic support aside from the sort of getting the right notes for the right classes. But I was pretty fine academically, but socially I had no idea how to make friends and keep friends. So for me, finding that sort of social niche, the marching band for me, or if it's a dance program, or if it's a theater program, or if it's a whatever club, finding a niche where there's other students who share some of the same interests and maybe are a little quirky in their own ways. And so you can connect with this sort of parallel interest helps as well.
Kudzai, I was going to ask Tom something similar to what Carolyn asked about higher education. So Tom, do you have recommendations for new grads as they enter the workforce? Same kind of thing, like Amy talked about with her son.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great question. I wish I had a great answer for it. You got to find. I think you got to, and I mean, and this goes beyond the question of neurodivergence, right? You got to find a place where you fit in, whether it's because they respect the way that you want to work, or whether it's because you share the values of the organization. If you've got a connection, if your personal values align with the organizational values, for my money, that's long-term career success. I don't think there's any research to back that up, but that's my humble opinion. Yeah. So, and in terms of yeah, that's a tough question. That's you've really got to understand the organization you're going into, if you and make a judgment on, if you self-disclose, how are they going to interpret that? It might be better to figure that out early in your career, to take the risk in your first job, because you don't have a mortgage yet, you don't have a family yet, you can be a little bit more I know it's tough to think that way when I guess you get a lot of student debt these days. So it's still a risk, but that's a tough question. I don't know that I have a good answer for it until we get the world to change a little bit more.
I could take it on a little bit in terms of what I could have done better as a new grad. I think like looking in onto the company, like if they have any special programs, because once I committed to this job and then realized that, oh, they don't actually have XYZ supports that I need, that was like, kind of like a wake up call. But now like being at Drexel and like talking to other people and like figuring out that like SAP has a program where they actually hire, neurodiverse candidates like that. For me, I don't believe that until I experienced that in my head. It's like, that's the coolest thing ever. I didn't know about that, but finding out like what you need as a person, and then there's going to be a job for you. I know that sounds idealistic, but trust me, after leaving, I'm now not blinkered anymore and thinking this was everything, be it all and end all. But now finding out that there's options out here and there's actually like initiatives being done by so many really cool companies, it's good to do research, finding out what you need and what you want out of your position. And I'm pretty sure you can find it out there. So yeah.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. Kudos to SAP because they were really a pioneer in this, and they've really convinced other people to follow. JP Morgan is, I think, the most recent that I've heard of. Yeah, there's a lot of people on board with it now, but it tends to be the larger companies. If you're going to the smaller companies now, it's okay. Some get it, and they do some really, really innovative things at the smaller companies. Usually it's because management or ownership has got some personal experience with it, and they get it, and they make they diffuse that down through the organization. Amy, you look like you wanted to object
Jump in
to
there.
what I was saying.
Well, no, I'm not objecting. I agree with you. But from what we've been experiencing in DASP, so Peg Monahan used to run the SAP Autism at Work program, and I kind of grabbed her and brought her over here when she was done there, and she's kind of been our employment advisor, helping students get co-ops. She's got a lot of connections in the neurodiversity employment network and things like that. Which has been great. But what we're finding is that a lot of the larger companies are not hiring our students. The ones that are hiring the students are actually the smaller companies, which is interesting. That's not to say that there aren't a few here and there. I know we have a few that, in CCI that have been phenomenal, working for the NSA and working for, different government contractors and things like that, which has been great. But as far as like the larger, like, I don't want to name companies, but it's been interesting. It's been interesting because a lot of those, but it's great that they're still promoting the message, I guess, because it's getting it out there, and we do need the larger companies to do that.
And I want to.
Can I just jump in as a manager? I've worked at Drexel for like 30 years, and Marie and I are colleagues. And you can work in a big organization, and we have some really great managers, and we have some really crappy managers. And so, right? So it doesn't always mean that everybody in the organization is the same. And I think when you individually have that communication with your manager, that makes such a difference. Because if they're a good manager, like Marie and I will, definitely have conversations like, I'm not connecting with this person. Like, what am I missing? Like, why isn't this person being able to do this type of thing? And if you really have that honesty and you have that conversation with your manager, I think that's the best thing. And as Tom said, take the chance. If your manager's a jerk, then you probably don't want to work for them and you should go someplace else. And it may be someplace else within the organization, but that's just not the right manager. Or again, you've got to change and adapt to what their approach is to things.
You can fire your manager. Yes, it's called quitting and going to work for somebody who's not a jerk. So yes, you could fire your manager. And Amy, I want to say that I think that trend of the smaller companies stepping up to the plate, that's really encouraging, because that's where most of the employment is in the small and medium sized. And that's where the numbers are. It's where the growth usually is. So if you're seeing that trend, I think that's terrific. And it's great if the big companies, if they use their megaphone and the small and medium enterprises listen to it and say, hey, yeah, we should listen, because, you know, Megacorp is saying this, so it must be true. I'll take it. That's a win.
Amy, did you see my note?
I did. So Lynn, you're asking if there's any companies in the creative arts, or? Oh, you're muted.
Well, you know, you would think, and we heard Sarah's experience with theater, and you just mimicked my kids' workaround through high school, which you realize you can't really rely on a workaround forever. But you'd think they like to say, oh, as screenwriters and as theater, we get all the like quirky people. But honestly, none of them have walked the walk, right? Disney's a bad example because it's so mega, but even small, medium, you know, companies in the entertainment area or theater area, are they showing you to be really hiring, or are they just talking about it?
They're getting hired. In the past couple of years, it's been a little difficult with COVID. That
Right.
shut down a lot of things. But we actually did just have one he graduated recently, but he was working for A&E, which was a cool project he was on. So it's like bits and pieces, you know, and PEG really helps them kind of like figure out which direction to go and where to look. And we look outside of the co-op system and inside, outside, around it, you know. But yeah, there's hope.
Okay.
If it gives you any hope, I'm in design, and through my I would say connections of I was part of a neurodiverse in the workplace committee when I still lived in San Francisco, and through that networking kind of got that opportunity to work and get back into design. So there's still hope out there, and it's also at a smaller company that no one knows, but I feel like there are opportunities for creatives out there, definitely.
Just as we wind down on time, Steph, did you want to announce our winners? Steph? Or email? Do you want to put them in the chat? You're breaking up a little bit.
I feel like, yeah, I will put them in the chat so that the conversation going, if that's better.
Yeah, that's perfect. Did the panel want to share any final thoughts? Anything that struck you about what we talked about today, or just general insights?
I just appreciate everybody being here today, and listening. And, you know, if there's anything that we can do to help anybody on campus or off campus, just, you know, shoot us an email.
I think also I really learned a lot in terms of just how, even though our experiences are so different, there's that kind of highlight where it's oh, I also experienced the same. It's you know, similar to you, Sarah, the theater and joining a club or an organization in college as a way to make and build communities. So yeah, I will always keep doing that.
I would say also thank you everybody for coming and for listening. And I feel like we could keep talking about this for another hour. There's so much content. So I hope we continue to do more of these and talk more about this as it relates to both the autistic experience in higher education and the autistic experience in the workplace. And you know, because it's such a widely varied and diverse topic, and there's so many different experiences. And so the more experiences we can get out there, the more it will help more people.
I just want to say thanks, Amy, for the invite, and Kudzai and Sarah. It was terrific meeting you guys. Your story is very inspirational. Thanks for everybody for showing up. And yeah, I love the comment that, you know, even though the stories are all different, there's common themes, and that's encouraging, because that means that we've got a message to the small and medium enterprise employers.
Yeah, I mean, and Amy hosted a great panel yesterday, which was a day in the life of a neurodivergent student. And just to hear from the students from their perspective is just inspiring, and it's empowering for the things that we all do every day, and maybe just looking at that from a slightly different perspective and understanding what kind of impact that can have on one person, right? So we can't thank you enough for your insights. I think Steph's having a little bit of technical, oh, nope, she came right through. So the winners of Sarah's book are Ruth Abrams, Allison Burke, and Natalie Pendergast. Congratulations. Thank you for coming, and we'll follow up with you so we can get you the book ASAP. So thank you all again, and we hope we can continue this conversation. Thanks to Amy and Das for co-sponsoring, Sarah and Tom. Have a good evening, everyone.